Hello, classmates and Dr. Groves. This is Nicole Dalton, and this is my MPA 530 week number 4 multimedia discussion board. In this week's discussion board, I'll be covering the City of Rancho Cucamonga's comprehensive annual fiscal report, and I'll be answering the questions of, is the City of Rancho Cucamonga fiscally solvent, and what indicators I use to figure out that answer, and also comparing the city's budget to the CAFR and seeing if there was a difference between those two. The first question that I'll be answering is whether or not the City of Rancho Cucamonga is fiscally solvent. And to figure this out, I took a screenshot of the CAFR and specifically the analysis of net position, and I looked at the deferred outflows of resources for 2020, and the total of outflow of resources was $25,211. And based on this number, you can see that it's positive. And to me, that indicates that the city's assets exceeded its losses, meaning that the taxes, bonds, and fees were all covered the city's expenses for that year. And that would mean that the City of Rancho Cucamonga is fiscally solvent. But hypothetically, let's say that that number was negative. That means that the city was now in debt, and they would need to adjust that and offset it for the next fiscal year. So they would have to possibly increase future taxes and fees in order to offset those funds, or even a reduction in services. On the complete opposite end of that spectrum is if that number was exponentially positive. That means that there was a surplus in funds and the city could reinvest that money by doing major maintenance repairs, increasing city services, or even reduce fees and taxes. But this is very unlikely and most often doesn't happen, but it is a possibility. And based on the city's number of $25,211, it does indicate to me that it's fiscally solvent, but they're not in a position to do major surplus in funds where reinvestments could occur for that next fiscal year. Prior to this course, I always thought that looking at a city's open budget was going to be the most reliable information that you could go to figure out where the money's being spent and how much revenues came in for the city that year. But after reviewing this week's content, it was clearly indicated that a CAFR is more reliable than a budget because budgets are more or less projections, and a CAFR is way more detailed and has strict guidelines on how it is completed. One of those being that it has to be audited by an outside agency. And for the City of Rancho Cucamonga's CAFR, that was done by LSL, Lance, Skoll, and Lungard. And so they were the ones that did the auditing and made sure that this was completed correctly. And to determine a difference in the CAFR and the city's budget, I decided to look at the city's expenditures for 2020 to see if there was any discrepancies. So after reviewing, I looked at the city's budget and it indicated that its expenses for 2020 were $131 million. And then I compared that to the expenditures of the CAFR, and that indicated that the city's expenditure were actually $139 million for the 2020 fiscal year. So that just confirms that the CAFR and the budget are going to have different outcomes once the full audit is completed and all of the funds have been allocated for the CAFR at the end of the fiscal year. Being that I don't have a ton of experience when it comes to budgeting and public administration, these assignments are very challenging, but I'm learning a lot while doing them. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I look forward to hearing any feedback that you may have for me.